Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. We are Auraten, Dil Se Desi, a podcast for brown women by brown women. This is your host, Geet, and with me are my co hosts, Dr. Amna and Sammy Q. We will be talking about what it's like being a brown woman while living in America. Whether you grew up here, migrated here, or were born here, you'll learn through our discussions that we have much in common with each other. We hope that through the dialogue, you will find a judgment free community of Desi queens willing to listen and support each other while bypassing social taboos of the what will people think or log kya kahenge mentality. Since this is our first episode, we will spend it answering the pressing question on everyone's mind.
हम आपके हैं कौन
So, without further ado, let's go ahead with our first introduction. Sammy, go ahead.
Hello, Orte. My name is Sammy. I have called America home for the last almost 35 years of my life. I moved to the East Coast with my family at the age of, 5, 6 years old, and I'm currently living in the Midwest with my best friend and partner. We also have an old man cat who is the Dadaji of the house. By day, I work as a marketer in nonprofit marketing right now, and by night, I'm cooking up a storm of Pakistani and Indian food, which was what I think had grounded me in our Desi culture a lot. Growing up as a brown South Asian, Pakistani Muslim immigrant girl in the US has definitely changed how I perceive myself and others around me. And it's funny because my dad actually started calling me Sammy when we moved to the US, sort of a nod to like us coming to America.
Welcome, have a Gora name now.
Yeah, exactly.
is
He
very
also
nice.
called me, and he also called me Munna because I was the youngest in the family, and he
Too bad
wanted
you
a
weren't
boy.
treated like a munna.
Seriously. And although my consciousness, started in the US, part of me feels like it's still rooted in Pakistan and India. And over my lifetime, I think I've realized that I've been influenced by so many cultures around me. Growing up in a diverse neighborhood out on the East Coast and really kind of always being around diversity. And I think over time realized that I don't have to feel stuck between all these different cultures around me. But it's easy to feel that because you hear things like "tum to gori ho," "tum ye kya kar rahi ho," "tum to ladki ho," "tumhe kya pata desi ya Islam kya ke bare mein," and so like you hear these things over and over, and it sort of like sinks into your psyche. But I think over time I've had to reframe that in my mind to go, I can pick and choose the values that matter to me and not really care about what other people think of me and my multicultural identity. But really, I'm a Desi older millennial audit. And I'm really proud to be. I always identify myself as a woman first before anything else. And really, I think being a woman to me has been probably the most important identity in my life. And I'm really glad that we're here today talking about Arte and being the lovely Arte that we are as well.
The Zalil औरतें नहीं बनता.
Sometimes हरामी
Sometimes.
औरतें भी हो जाती हैं लेकिन कोई बात नहीं.
कोई बात
गुनहगार औरतें.
गुनहगार औरतें.
So yeah, I'm gonna actually turn it over to Dr.
Amna.
Hello, औरतें. My name is Amna Buttar. I am a doctor and a mom and human rights activist and a poet. I think that being a mom is really my identity that takes precedence over everything, but also human rights activist. And then doctor, I'm a doctor. I'm very happy about being a doctor, and I'm a poet. That's my creative side. I grew up in a Pakistani family. I actually was born and raised in Lahore, Pakistan. Had never left my house, never left my city, lived in a homogenous society until the age 24 when I came to US, the city of Milwaukee. We actually did not even know about Milwaukee until I got engaged, and we had to look it up in encyclopedia. That's my family, that we are all about books, and we had grew up with encyclopedias, and I grew up in a very eclectic household where I had older brothers and sister, and there was a 10-year gap, and I was a surprise. So I was raised by a mom who was very religious, but around me, my brothers and my father, they were more progressive, and we were a family of the progressive left. I grew up around labor movement and social justice, and I did not even know that. I thought growing up, I thought everybody's household had works of Lenin and Mao Zedong, and then realized that that's not the norm.
Yeah,
So
no.
grew up in a very
No, not at all.
grew up in a very eclectic household, and from very early on I had love of books, and there were hundreds and if not thousands of books around. And at age maybe around fourth grade, I think I was proficient in um, Urdu and English at adult level. And I just was bored with kids books, so I started reading adult level books and mystery and in
Oh, you're such a
English
nerd.
and English. I am a nerd. And that's what I was ridiculed about in school. That I always read, and but I was also, I grew up with boy cousins, so uh, I don't know if it's politically correct term or not, but I was a tomboy. I wanted for Eid, I wanted a tir kaman, bow and arrow or gun, and I would be slapped by my mother, and my cousins and my boy cousins and I, we used to go and break the dolls of my sister and my girl cousins. And so I really grew up with a very diverse background. And then at age 24, I came to this country in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and um, started my journey for my medical postgraduate education. And better part of my life has really been spent and being an academic doctor. I definitely identify as a woman first, and everything else sort of came afterwards. It's like South Asian and other things came afterwards. Um, I came to this country growing up in one place. I didn't even think about that I have to develop my own community. And it's only when I came here, I realized in the beginning, it was like, I don't belong to, quote, my community. And in a way, my community rejected me for my out of the box thinking, for my choices. And then I rejected my community until I came to a point where I realized that my identity is not only a woman, but a South Asian woman, a brown woman. So over the course of my life, I have developed a hybrid community. And that's why this Auraten podcast is important to me, because it's really expansion of community. And it's all about dialogue and listening and contributing to this dialogue of South Asian women called Auraten.
So that brings us to me, guys. I am Geet, also known as Geetu, Geeta, Geeti, depending on who I'm speaking to, also known as Dr. Geet. I am a South Asian Indian woman of Sindhi descent. I'm a daughter, a dog mom, a global citizen, a peacemonger, and a feminist. After all, how can you be brown and not be a feminist?
Yep.
Yup. I live in the Northeast and have called NYC home all my life. To me, there is a need for brown women's voices. Through Aurate, we will be able to create a new normal in which it is okay to speak our truths, a platform through which others can share their stories too in a judgment-free zone. To me, Aurate is the answer to the void I felt as an adolescent girl and a young woman making my way through the layers of me. Auraten is the phenomenal woman who isn't afraid to speak her truth, and Auraten is the ferocious mama bear who stands up for her daughters. Through this, I hope that we're able to reach out to women like myself. Growing up, I had a lot of, unlike Amna, I migrated here. Well, I didn't even migrate here. My parents migrated here back in the 70s, which makes me inevitably a huge fan of 80s rock music. And
Huge fan of 80s rock.
I love 80s rock music.
Yeah.
And growing up in the 80s here, it was very different environment than it is today, where we were still very few in number. Brown people were very, very few, small communities. Like Amna was saying, touching back on what she was saying, the communities were highly judgmental, as if we think that they're judgmental now. They were really bad back then. So either you were not brown enough or too brown or just, not
Too
white
American.
enough.
Yeah.
Too American. There was so much going back to Sammy's now, overlap is there, which is why we're all together. It was just a big identity crisis for me growing up, but I identified first as a girl. That was the first thing that was, drilled into my head almost, that I am a girl. And my womanness is something that I had to embrace. I mean, initially, as a brown girl, I rejected it, and I wished I was a boy, not because I wanted to be a boy, but because I envied the freedom that the boys had. I was a free spirit.
I was
as a
like
kid.
FOMO all the time.
Always FOMO. And I envied their freedom. I envied their autonomy, things that I just didn't feel like I had. I felt like my life was way out of my control. Even simple, it was so simple that it was like the things that I wore, like it had to be socially correct. A boy could put on a t-shirt and jeans and walk out the door, and I had to wear the salwar kameez and the churia and the bindi, and it was just ridiculous. So being a woman was how I identified first. And then the second one probably forced again by environment. Initially, as a child, I didn't recognize my racial ethnicity at all. To me, we were just children. And then I remember in school, the first time that I was told, well, you're not American. And I was just like, well, what the hell do you mean? Like, yeah, I am just as American as you are. And then it was like, no, but like, where are you from? And I was like, here, like it never, I've been here since all I can remember. So, but that identity crisis became a big part of me. And what that ended up doing as an American, what that ended up doing for me was embrace my brownness, to the point where even my brown friends who were American would turn around and call me, you're such a fob. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, I'm such a fob. So now, but my Indian friends, I'm being called a fob, but my American friends, I'm being called an Indian. So it was just ridiculous. But confusion somewhere along the way,
time, right?
Always confusion. And that's why I guess it came around to, yes, a hybrid community. And I created, and thank God for growing up, because I was able to just say, you know what, to hell with this. I get to define, just like you, Sammy, just like you, Amna. We get to define what the hell we're going to be. So after all of that nonsense, I am now, I embrace. And then, there was a flip side. As an adult, I had the other experience where I had embraced my Indian identity my whole life. And then I went to Pakistan to do medical relief work. And while I was there for 3 years, I realized that, I'm not that Desi. I am actually really American. So I guess that's where my entire identity comes from, which makes me say I'm a South Asian Indian woman of Sindhi descent, but I'm an American fundamentally. And that even that Americanness skews your views very differently in an entirely different direction than being just South Asian. So,
and I think that, people like, I have never really thought of race. I mean, I came to this country and I expected discrimination because I was different. I came from a third world country and there was a learning curve. So I expected that. And it's really race came into my consciousness much later. A lot of immigrants like me who come here as young adults, we sort of expect that because we're different and we think it's onus is on us to try to be like others. So it's really much later that I thought, my color is there, and I need to be proud of that. And also when I became a mom,
I think,
because I think
that's
more of
very
your
different.
reality.
Like for me growing up, whenever I would come home and I would tell a story about like, oh, I went through this kind of discrimination, my parents would always look at my father would be, oh, big deal, like pull up your big boy pants and move on in life.
Yeah.
And matlab kya hai, like to kya hua, to ye to sach hai na. But for me it was like not my such, right? I'm not brown, I'm not from India, what do you mean, I'm an American. So it was like that otherness. And it's so different because now I understand when you're saying it, okay, you expected it. I think he expected it. He's from that thinking where he was
Yeah.
like, well, I'm different. I'm coming here in my 20s or close to 30, and I clearly speak differently. I look different. I whatever. And so, but for me, it was not like that. And now I think from what you're saying, I actually recognize the fact that why there was that disconnect, which,
Yeah.
and that's funny because this is the first time that I'm recognizing it. So,
And I think that's a very similar experience that Geet, you and I share, of just being like raised here in the US from such a young age that like you don't think you're any different until you like go to school, and then everyone goes like, where'd you come from?
yeah, where are you from?
I had to do a presentation on Pakistan because they had no idea. They like couldn't even point it out on the map, and they kept asking me like really racist things like, do you worship cows? And I'm like, dude, like, and
Dude,
I
I'm
would come
Muslim.
home and I would come home and ask my parents, like, why are they saying these things? But for them, Amna, you're absolutely right. They came in with that thinking of like, well, that's just expected in this culture that you're going to face that racism. Whereas I was going, no, like, I'm part of this community in the US. I'm part of this school. Like, I'm part of America. Why am I being treated differently?
And also the ridiculousness of it. I came from a very big city, Lahore, in a small town. It's relatively small compared to Lahore, Milwaukee. And I went to DMV in mid 90s for my name change on my car. And the guy said to me, did I grow up with cars? I started driving at age 14. And at first, it took me a few seconds to realize what he was asking. And then I said, no, we actually went around on elephants.
Oh, yeah. How many times have we had those experiences? Eh?
So anyway, so that's
I-
why this podcast is important, because it's about women from different walks of life, women from different experiences,
Generations,
yet the three
yeah.
of different generations, and yet the three of us have one theme in common. We are independent minded South Asian women.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a part of all three of us that we've been sort of able to reclaim our identity through that, right? Through just that reflection process over time. And I think what we're touching on is, so we've talked about a lot of the challenges that we've faced as South Asian women. What is something that you like about being South Asian women?
What I like, I think more about being a woman or a South Asian woman. What I like about is my culture, my identity, because I said I had rejected my community. I was married to a white guy, and I sort of pretended I'm white. But my identity is more of culture than race. My ethnicity, I like the food, I like the culture, I like the femininity, I like the dressing, I like the colors. And to me, that's what I love about being a South Asian woman, is that I'm beautiful, I can wear any color that I want, and I look good in it. My skin, I'm proud of my skin color.
Yeah, for sure. Even though we
I
were
think-
told not to be, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think I love being I'm at the risk of sounding so cheesy right now, but I love Bollywood.
We
I
love
love
cheesiness.
Bollywood.
Me too.
Bollywood music. I love Lollywood. I love Lollywood music. It has nothing to do with the South Asian woman, but I'm just saying, like those are little parts of my culture and community that I do love. I love the food. I think we're so rich in heritage and culture. It's such an old culture, and there's so much uniting us through our culture. I mean, Indian,
And the
Pakistan. Hey,
music and
I
the
also want to mention, just as another point that brings us together, we're Indians and Pakistanis, which is, not a normal thing. I mean,
Yeah.
it is normal, but I'm saying, like, we have the other thing that binds us, three of us together, is that we're actually peacemongers at heart, that believe that India and
Unity.
Pakistan, yeah, in unity, and India and Pakistan are originally one country. And as much as anybody would like to say something else and something different, that's rubbish. We share culture, we share food, we share language, we share
So many ingredients
so
that go
much,
across. I
so
mean,
much.
I think I mentioned earlier, like
spirituality,
food
our
was that.
customs, our
Yeah.
rituals. I mean,
Yeah.
everything is
The
sacred.
music. Come on.
Music,
The music.
poetry.
The
I
music is
think
fabulous, yes.
being like a South Asian woman, I love the mystery of these extra layers I have, right? Like I'm not just a brown woman. Like I have all this ancestry behind me, and I've been able to like explore that a little bit over time. And that's what's exciting for me, that I keep peeling back these layers. Like the fact that we're all onions, and we peel back these layers and we go, oh my God, there's more to me than I myself perceived, right? Or that other people were perceiving.
Thousands
Yeah,
of
and those,
years of history. My
Yeah.
daughter wrote a paper for her freshman year about who she is. And I cried when I read that paper, because she talked about her mom. She talked about how at one point she was really more ashamed of her brownness and her Desi culture, but her mom used to cook while Desi music was on, and that made her feel like part of her culture, and
Yeah.
she is who she is today because of that. So yes, my daughter also identifies as a brown woman. So
And that probably gives you validation, right? Like just
yes.
even being in your own skin and being the person that you are.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. Name an inspirational woman in your life.
I'm gonna start. I find all those women that I came across while working in Pakistan inspirational. Every single woman that I came across in a village, that's working hard against the norm, going against societal norms. Over there, it's very different. Obviously, when you're in a village, it's not the things that we talk about. It's more about financial security, financial independence. It's more about autonomy. It's more about just being able to support your family. It's more about a woman's right for education. So they're very different fights that they're fighting, but I find that any woman that's fighting against the norm is inspirational.
Yeah,
So it's not one
for
woman.
sure.
I mean, I can't even say like Mother Teresa or whoever, because
So we're inspirational to you.
I guess. Yes,
we
Sammy
are.
is inspirational. Dr. Amna already knows how much I respect and find her inspiring. Sabine, super
Agreed.
inspirational. So
So for me, my grandmother, my dadi, and my puppy, and my mother too. But I had a lot of issues with my mother. But definitely my grandmother. She was a young woman who became a widow at at a young age. My dad was the oldest child, who was 5 years old, and my grandmother had to marry her brother-in-law. But my grandmother was a very strong woman, and she is the reason why we are who we are, because she stood by her son and she supported him. And at one point they actually ran from the village because my dad's grandfather died, who was supportive of my dad, and his uncle and stepfather said no more education. And my grandma and my dad ran away, literally ran from the village to her parents. My dad went to school and college after that. So my grandmother definitely, and my dad's sister is my inspiration.
Sammy, you?
Nice. This question, I've been thinking about it a lot. And I think one person that really came to mind was actually a professor of mine in college. And I had no idea there was a class called South Asian Feminism. And I was like, why didn't I see this before? And so obviously I signed up, but I think that professor really, she helped me understand all the things that I was feeling and experiencing through my own life. I had language for it. I could call it, I could name things that were happening. And I could say finally, like, accept the fact that I was a feminist because I was just fighting for my own rights and fighting for other women's rights
Hell yeah.
through just, family and friends.
Yes.
And I owe that teacher, that professor a lot for just helping me understand that and helping me give that language. And I'm really proud that I'm still friends with her today. So,
Yay.
yeah.
I don't think women's empowerment. I mean, of course, I do think of women's empowerment as a big idea across the world, a global idea. But that's not. I feel like that's not what really matters, and I think that's true about almost everything in my life. The way that I try to live my life is to actually practice that on every day-to-day situations, and provide that empowerment, if you will, to the people that I speak to on a regular. I always try really hard. And so the feminism, I think feminism is a living, breathing thing. It's not just
For sure.
an ideal or
Yeah.
a topic to discuss,
And it's changing
But
over time, right? Like feminism looks different because of time as well, right? We were fighting for something different 100 years ago. We're fighting for something a little different now, but we are still fighting. That's
We're
the
still fighting.
common
And
thing.
also I look at my grandmother, my dadi, didn't even know what feminism was, but
Right.
she wanted to survive. She wanted her family to survive. My Puppy, my dad's sister, who my dad married at age 13 to his cousin to survive in the family. And she never thought of herself as feminist, but she was a feminist. She was an empowered woman, despite all the circumstances against her. So these are women who are my
I think I agree with you. I think
Yeah.
even my grandmother was a feminist and an
Yeah.
inspired woman because she went against the norm. In her own ways, even my mother has, God bless
Even
her.
my mom.
My mom is still struggling to create her own identity against the norm. And, I think that's a common fight for brown women, that we're
Yeah.
all trying to create our own identities in this world, wherever we
And
are.
my mom, who supported me when I wanted to marry a white guy, my mom was the only person in my family who stood by me. And she said, you have suffered enough. This is a man who loves you and he will make you happy. I am there for you. So all these women who didn't even call themselves feminists were feminists.
Yeah. And I'm really glad that we're living at a time that we have language for this, that we can identify these things. And we can talk about them. And and that's, I think, that opportunity that we have, even with this podcast, even for people listening, of just, South Asian women out there listening, of reclaiming our bodies, our minds, and our hearts, really to be the women that we want to be, rather than the women that we're told to be.
And to give hope to people and
Yeah.
say, just be true to yourself.
Right.
And feel free to reach out. I mean, if for whatever reason, whoever's listening, if there's somebody out there that feels alone, please don't. We're here. Reach out to us. I'm sure between whoever, at least three of us, one of us has been through what you're going through. So reach out to us, talk to us. It's a judgment-free zone.
It is. Truly.
For sure.
Ladies, this has been great.
Yeah. Such a wonderful conversation.
Till we meet again.
And also, you can check us out on auraten.com. That's AURATEN.com. And you can follow
Auraten.
You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And our handle is @3Auraten. That's @3Auraten. This has been great. Thank you so much, 3Auraten.
Been fun.
Thank you, ladies. And that brings us to the end of episode 1. Thank you for tuning in. If you liked what you heard, please share with friends and family. Feel free to tag us on Instagram at 3 AURATEN, or visit our website at www.auraten.com, where you can leave us a text or voice note and show us some love. Thank you, and until next time.